All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. And this time we are tackling a really uh, an interesting topic.
Mm.
Um, One that I think a lot of people have probably thought about or at least encountered in some way.
Yeah, for sure.
It's we got a prompt from a listener uh, ab- about age gap relationships and particularly how this all plays out in the world of expats.
Oh, interesting.
So, we're going to be looking at this from all angles, the ethical considerations, the
Right.
cultural influences, even, just the personal motivations behind these types of relationships.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, have you ever like really sat down and thought about age gap relationships, especially, you throw in the whole expat dimension?
It's definitely something that can make you think.
Yeah, totally. And before you like really get into the thick of it, maybe it's good to kind of set the stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
What exactly are we talking about here? Like, is there an actual number when we say age gap relationship?
Right. That's a great question.
Where does it cross the line from like, oh, they have a few years between them to like, whoa, that's a big age difference.
Well, I think it's tricky because there isn't a hard and fast rule.
Right.
It's not like if there's a 10-year difference, suddenly it's an age gap relationship.
Right. Right.
It really depends on cultural norms.
Yeah.
What's considered acceptable or normal in one place might be seen very differently somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true.
And of course, you have individual perceptions too.
Of course.
Like what one person thinks is a huge gap, someone else might not even bat an eye at.
Exactly. And then you add in the whole, societal judgment piece
Oh, absolutely.
where it's like, are people whispering? Are they raising eyebrows? Like that definitely adds another layer to it.
Yeah, for sure. It becomes this whole thing about unwritten rules and expectations.
Totally. And that's what makes this listener prompt so fascinating because they specifically mentioned expats.
Right.
So, like, what is it about living abroad that might make this topic even more, complex or interesting?
Well, I think a big part of it is the whole idea of a fresh start.
Yeah.
When you move to a new country, especially if you're leaving everything behind, there's this sense of reinvention.
You can be whoever you want.
Exactly. And that can apply to all aspects of your life, including your relationships.
So it's like maybe back home you were surrounded by certain expectations,
Mm,
family traditions.
absolutely.
But then you move abroad and it's like, okay, I can explore different parts of myself.
You're not bound by the same social circles or pressures.
Right. And maybe that leads to considering relationships you might not have looked at before.
Yeah, and research actually backs this up.
Oh, really?
Studies have shown that expats are something like 30% more likely to form relationships outside of their typical social circles back home.
Wow. That's pretty significant.
It is. It really speaks to that idea of breaking free from norms and exploring new possibilities.
And I guess when you're immersed in a new culture,
Right.
you're exposed to different values, different attitudes towards age, and relationships in general. So maybe what seemed taboo or unusual back home is just like no big deal in your new country.
It can be really eye-opening.
Yeah, totally. But of course, we have to acknowledge the other side of the coin here.
Yeah.
The listener also brought up a really important point about the potential for exploitation,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to older individuals.
Yeah.
Are they more vulnerable in this context?
That's a really valid concern.
Especially when you think about things like finances, emotions.
Right, because you're in a new environment, maybe you don't have the same support systems.
It's easier to feel isolated.
Exactly, and that can make anyone more susceptible to being taken advantage of.
So I guess it's a reminder to be extra vigilant, to really look out for red flags.
Definitely, and I think it highlights the importance of consent and agency.
Okay.
Like, no matter the age difference, every individual in a relationship needs to feel like they have a voice.
Right, like they're not being pressured or coerced.
Exactly, and it's about recognizing those power dynamics. Is there a genuine balance of power in the relationship?
Right, so it's not just about age, but also about, all those other factors that can create an uneven playing field.
Absolutely, and honestly, those considerations are important in any relationship.
Oh, for sure.
Age gap or not.
Yeah.
It's about making sure everyone involved feels respected and safe.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
So, the listener's prompt also kind of focused on the whole older man, younger woman dynamic.
Yeah, it's a classic image.
Right, like is that just a stereotype or is it something to that pattern? And what about, the flip side, older woman, younger man?
Right. Well, I think societal expectations definitely play a role here.
Okay.
There's often a double standard when it comes to aging and attractiveness.
Interesting.
Like, think about it. A man with gray hair, he's often seen as distinguished, right?
Yeah, silver fox.
Exactly. But a woman with gray hair, she might feel pressure to dye it,
To hide it.
to look younger.
Yeah.
And that messaging, it gets internalized.
Wow.
And it can definitely influence who we see as desirable partners.
It's like those societal norms, they seep into our subconscious.
They really do. And that's why we often see those patterns playing out.
So it's not necessarily that people are consciously choosing partners based on these stereotypes.
Right.
But it's like those societal influences are kind of lurking in the background.
Exactly. Shaping our perceptions and preferences.
It's fascinating, really. So we've talked a lot about the potential pitfalls,
Yeah.
the concerns. But I'm also curious, are there couples who make age gap relationships work?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, are there successful examples out there? And so what can we learn from them?
I think it's important to remember that success in a relationship is subjective.
Right.
Like, there's no one-size-fits-all definition of what works.
It's different for everybody.
Exactly. But there are definitely couples out there who are thriving in age gap relationships.
So what's their secret?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to the same core principles that make any relationship strong.
Okay.
Open communication. Being able to talk openly and honestly about your needs and expectations. Shared values, being on the same page about the big things in life.
Right.
And of course, mutual respect, valuing each other's perspectives, even if they're different.
So it's not really about the age difference itself.
Exactly. It's about those foundational elements of a healthy relationship.
But I guess those things become even more important when you're navigating an age gap.
Right, because you might be coming from different life stages, different
You
experiences.
have to work a little harder to bridge that gap.
And that can actually be a really beautiful thing.
How so?
You have the opportunity to learn from each other, to grow in ways you might not have otherwise.
Okay, each person brings something unique to the table.
Exactly. And that can enrich the relationship immensely.
So it's not always about, overcoming challenges. It can also be about embracing those differences.
Absolutely. And recognizing the value they bring.
I like that. What about, for people who are maybe looking for connection across age differences,
Yeah.
but a romantic relationship isn't what they're seeking? Like, are there other options out there?
Oh, tons of options.
Like what?
Well, strong friendships are a great example,
Yeah.
Having friends of different ages can expose you to new perspectives, new ways of thinking.
Absolutely.
Mentorship programs are another fantastic way to connect across generations.
Right. You get the wisdom and experience of someone older, and they get the fresh perspective of someone younger.
It's a win-win.
And, of course, just being actively involved in communities that cater to a diverse age range.
Yeah, like volunteering, joining clubs, taking classes.
So many possibilities.
Exactly. It's about finding those spaces where you feel comfortable connecting with people regardless of age.
It's not just about romantic relationships. It's about
Yeah.
fostering those human connections.
Exactly. And those connections can be incredibly fulfilling and supportive.
Absolutely. So the listener also mentioned the legal side of things.
Oh, right, the legal stuff.
Is there anything specifically addressing age gap relationships? Like, are there laws about it?
It's actually a bit of a gray area, legally speaking.
Oh.
Like in most places, there aren't laws that specifically prohibit relationships between consenting adults.
So age isn't really a factor.
Not in a legal sense, no.
So it's more about,
Mhm.
are both people of legal age and are they freely consenting?
Exactly.
But even if something's legally okay, doesn't mean it's always smooth sailing. Right.
Oh, definitely not.
Like societal norms, they could be just as powerful as any law.
Absolutely.
Like imagine building a life in a new country and then facing disapproval from your community just because of the age difference in your relationship.
It can be incredibly isolating.
It's a whole other layer of complexity.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that the law doesn't always reflect the nuances of real life experiences.
Such a good point.
Yeah,
Well, I
thanks.
feel like we've really gone deep here.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
From defining what an age gap even is to exploring all the unique dynamics within the expat community.
And the ethical and cultural considerations.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
There really has.
But as always, this is just the starting point,
Yeah.
We've scratched the surface, but there's so much more to explore. So for all of you listening out there, what are your thoughts on all of this? What stood out to you? What questions do you still have? Age gap relationships, especially in the context of expats, it's a topic that deserves continued exploration and critical thinking.
Definitely.
So keep the conversation going. Talk to your friends, your family, even strangers if you feel like it. Let's break down those stereotypes, challenge those assumptions, and really try to understand this complex and fascinating aspect of human connection.
I'm all for it.
Me too. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah.